Hi there, and you are very welcome for Classeek 15. It's Jack Pepper here, composer, radio presenter, author, and hopefully helping give you some top classical career advice with these bite-sized 15-minute coffee break conversations, sitting down with some classical music insiders. Today, we're exploring work-life balance, self-doubt, perfectionism, and how to look after your mental health in a creative career. Our expert, the pianist Pallavi Mahidhara. She made her orchestral debut aged 10 and has since appeared in solo and orchestral concerts across 5 continents. She's the first Indian female pianist to have a degree from the Curtis Institute and among the first to host her own podcast on mental health in classical music. That series is called The Conscious Artist, and it's explored topics including eating disorders, physical injuries, self-acceptance, gender and power imbalances. It's a fascinating series, it really is, with a truly fascinating creative. But this time, she is answering the questions. And I began by asking Pallavi why she created her own series.
Well, it came out of many different things. First and foremost, I think the pandemic and everything that we were going through as a society, as a global community. And I wanted to create a safe space for people to feel seen and heard and have their experiences reflected in other stories. And I had already started doing some mental health workshops in, summer camps and schools when I would travel to perform. And in fact, it was somebody at Classeek, of all places, that said, well, why don't you do a podcast? And I thought, who's going to listen to that? And then I started writing down ideas and creating content. And within 2 weeks, I'd had like 35 episodes of content written down. And I thought, okay, I think I really want to do this. And that's kind of how it started.
And when you have so much content, presumably that means so many challenges facing musicians and areas that you could explore. What would you say were the sort of the biggest challenges that you were keen to tackle early on? Maybe the challenges that you were hearing around you.
That's such a good question. I think one of the most universal issues we all deal with as a society, not just in the musical community, I would say are like stress and burnout. And one of my very first episodes, I think it was the 3rd episode, was with a physician, in fact, and we talked about stress and burnout and the brain and sort of how to maximize and optimize our brain usage and our ability to create or perform creatively under extreme stress. As musicians and artists have to do, we're constantly under stress. We're constantly under some sort of pressure, whether it's self-imposed or in the environment, whether it's, we're performing here or we're performing there. And so sort of how to manage your stress and your emotions in the healthiest way possible so that we can consistently show up as best as possible.
So what helps you deal with stress? If you find yourself getting overwhelmed by a concert or a schedule coming up, what do you do? What helps you personally with stress?
Well, I preach a lot, but I don't always take my own advice. No,
I'm guilty too.
I've worked through a lot of sort of different methods and tried to figure out what works best for me with the understanding that every day will be different and with the understanding that there needs to be flexibility. And I think sort of the sign of emotional health, good emotional health, is flexibility. So, as musicians, we're traveling, our train gets delayed, our flight gets canceled. It takes 3 hours to get from the airport to the hotel instead of 30 minutes because there's some huge traffic buildup or something. There's always things that happen. And I think being prepared, it's not about being prepared for the worst situation. It's about being prepared for any situation and knowing that no matter what happens, we will find a way to change course. We will find a new solution and we will still be able to show up in our best way. I think that's, there's a really great psychologist named Susan David, I believe, and she talks about emotional agility. And I really like that term because it's essentially the same kind of concept that we think about when we're thinking about being healthy physically. Those of us that, work out regularly are stronger and more fit and more flexible and therefore have less back pain or this or that. Why do we not think about it the same way for our mind? Well, we should.
It's interesting that you say so that we can show up in our best way, so that we can be in best form. Of course, if we're using like a physical analogy, there are days when if you're a regular gym goer, you go and it feels harder, it feels tougher. You're not always that sort of heavy lifting weightlifter. For the equivalent in a concert then, for those days where you do inevitably feel more tired or, the pressure is showing, how do you show up in the best way when it's tougher like that?
I will clarify what I mean by that. Best way means your best on that day. And sometimes that will be like I guess it's the point of giving your maximum, giving 100%, but accepting that your 100% today may not be the same as yesterday and will not be the same as tomorrow.
So when we're on the sort of subject of perfectionism, which is something certainly I can be accused of, is it unhealthy to be a perfectionist then? I mean, I know it's something so many of my creative peers are. Is it healthy to be a perfectionist?
It's very funny because the word perfectionist has taken on such, I think, a negative term. But if we try to look at it in a positive light, one could say that a perfectionist is detail-oriented, is interested in the fine-tuning, is interested in all aspects of whatever they're doing, right? We could always turn something positive. And I think in the negative aspect, when we let it take control of us, it means we're trying to have control over things that we will never have control over. Because at the end of the day, we can only, quote unquote, control what we say, what we do, not even necessarily what we think, right? Because when we have anxiety, those anxious thoughts can come in. What we can do with that is, again, learn how to manage it. So honestly, going through my own, first of all, going through the COVID times, going through my own big life changes, going through a lot of therapy and learning a huge amount about myself and where my perfectionism was stemming from, I started to actually try to remove the word perfect from my vocabulary. Because what does perfect even mean? We could say nature is perfect, but humans are imperfect by nature. And I think that's the beauty of it, that we are all unique and different, and we are not robots. I mean, okay, we're entering the age of AI, but we are not robots yet. So let's hold on to that beautiful human aspect of imperfect. And so I don't strive for everything to be perfect anymore. I think that idea that I cannot control everything and I only need to worry about just what I want to do, I can't think about how that person's going to understand what I said or how that person's going to hear the piece that I'm playing. I can't worry about that. I can only worry, if I want to use the word worry, I can only worry about showing up and presenting. When I say presenting my best self, I mean giving what I want to be able to give that day and sharing that with my audience, sharing that with myself. Like even a solo performance is a collaborative, creative experience with the audience, with the hall, with the acoustics, with the energy, with the atmosphere. And when we think about it that way, no one is coming to the concert hall expecting to tear us down. No one is trying to come, hopefully, with the intention to tear us down. People are coming because they want to hear what we have to say. They want to be part of this experience. They're not asking for perfectionism. Why are we putting that on ourselves?
Yeah, it's inward, isn't it? It's actually
Absolutely.
coming from ourselves rather than the world around us. I suppose that's interesting as well, because then the flip side, or the sort of the core of perfectionism, is actually self-doubt in a way, isn't it? It's potentially an insecurity. I mean, how common is self-doubt in the artists that you've spoken with, you've worked with in your own career, and maybe how important actually is a little bit of self-doubt?
I think every single human being on this planet experiences self-doubt at some point, musician or not, artist or not. And I think it's normal. I think it's healthy to a certain degree, because when we think we know everything, we prevent ourselves from learning. And frankly, the more I learn, the less I know. So, the more I realize I know less. And so I think to be willing to acknowledge that we don't know everything and that there's always something to learn from and there's always something to grow from. And I think as musicians, we inherently understand that with the music itself. I don't think there's a single musician, true musician, that plays a piece of music on stage and thinks, wow, that was the best it's ever going to get. And that is perfect. And I'm never going to change anything now. I think most true musicians, honest musicians would never say that, because we're aware that today the way I play it is not going to be the same as tomorrow because of the way I sleep, what I eat, the environment, the day, whatever it is. And in 10 years, the experience that I gain from life is going to shape the way that I understand this piece differently. And so I think inherently we understand that with the pieces that we learn, we don't ever think that they're perfect, and we expect that there will always be something different that we do or something new that we learn. And so it's really curious that we don't think about that as human beings. Why is that not the same as human beings? Well, it should be, because who I am today is not who I was yesterday. There are things that happened yesterday that have changed maybe some mindset I have today, right? Or from 5 years ago, or what will be in 10 years, because with each passing year, we grow and we learn, and that inherently changes us and evolves us. And that's a good thing.
And you touch on sort of changing from even yesterday. I'm thinking, how do you compare now to when you were 10 and you made your orchestral debut? I mean, were there sort of misunderstandings you had at that age of life as a musician that have since been put right? I mean, how would you describe yourself now versus then?
Oh, I think I think as children, we have a lot less inhibitions. I think we're so much freer. I think we have so much more creative spark in a way, because we're not limited by societal beliefs or societal constraints. And so the way we approach life, the way we approach, our creative art, those of us who went into an artistic field at a young age, is with wonder and without judgment most of the time. Of course, if you're doing music from a very young age, like say starting at the age of 3, you're probably going to start having criticism and self-doubt very quickly, because your teachers are saying, no, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, right? So at some point you have to learn how to distinguish that. And of course, at the age of 10, I think most of us are not thinking about that. But I mean, I remember that debut that happened, it sort of started a trajectory of being called at the last minute, because that's basically what happened. I got asked to fill in for someone at the last minute, and I had less than a week to learn and perform Mozart Piano Concerto No. 21. And I was 10 years old. I didn't know the piece. I hadn't even heard it. And so to have the determination to face that challenge, to take on that challenge and face that challenge. And I mean, I was crying so much the day of the concert. I was so nervous, but I see my performance video. I don't have a lot of childhood memories, but I remember being on stage and performing. And I remember the courage that I had, and so the resilience that I had. And so, when we think about if we maybe take that childlike courage and try to maybe apply that in our adult self, remembering that, every single human being has something to offer in this world. Everyone has some talent. Everyone has something to say. There is room enough for all of us. There is room to be imperfect and human, because again, we're not machines. We're not robots. We're not computers. People want to hear our soul. People want to hear what we individually have to say. And so I feel like remembering that helps to kind of keep us connected with that childlike innocence and spirit, in order to be able to access that creativity without getting trapped in the, what if that happens? What if this happens? What if they say this? What if I forget this? What will people think? At the end of the day, everyone is so busy with their own stuff. Like, nobody cares. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, everyone is focused on their own stuff. At the end of the day, no one's really worried about what you're doing. So just focus on yourself and just try your best,
So just finally, if you were giving some, I mean, golden rules is probably a crass phrase, because it is different for everybody. And as you say, every day is different. So the rules may change. But if you were sort of giving a one-stop shop, things to keep in mind for a young artist starting out in their career, listening to this show, what are the priorities, the sort of the lines that you live by, if you like, that they should keep in their mind?
I love this question. Quality over quantity. always means less hours, but focus, concentrate, be present in your practicing, be present, be conscious, be aware of what you're doing, be intentional with what you're doing. Don't repeat things 10 times in a row on autopilot. Practice with your brain, consciously, physically present there. That is so much more effective than 8 hours where you're thinking about, what you want to eat for dinner. And I would say also being kind to yourself, listening to your body, learn to listen to what your body needs. Are you falling asleep while practicing? Okay, go take a nap. Are you spacing out while practicing? Get up and take a break, take a walk, have a cup of tea, have a snack, have something that gives you nutrients and boosts your energy. And I don't mean energy drinks or just drinking a cup of coffee I mean nourishing your body with healthy things that will then translate to nourishing your mind and your muscles in a healthy way. And finally, remembering that the world is big enough for all of us, that there is no one definition of success. That success is defined by each individual, by whatever it means for us, and that each of us has something unique to offer. So find what is your unique voice as a musician or your unique way of sharing your music as a musician and focus on that. You will find your community, you will find your people, they will find you. But that is the easiest way to stay authentic to ourselves, to stay true to ourselves, and therefore to stay healthy within ourselves.
So, quality over quantity, be kind to yourself, listen to your body, not just to music, and success is self-defined. I think I'm going to get a frame for that, if that's all right. Pallavi Mahidhara, great pleasure. Thank you for all your top tips.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.
And I hope those top tips will prove handy for you. Thanks for joining us. If you want more, the full Classeek 15 series is available on the usual podcast platforms and online at classeek.com. There are chats covering classical music radio, how to market yourself online, and even how music changes our brain. And for all the latest Classeek-related updates and more, do follow at Classeek Music on social media. Thanks for joining me, Jack Pepper, and I hope we can do this again soon.